You're recording, not mine.
Welcome to everyone who's joining us on Facebook and on Zoom. We will be getting started here in just about 3 minutes. So Susie, what's your favorite national park of all time? Since not just Alaska, but it looks like all over the West. You've been
Yeah,
chomping
well,
some
it would
time.
it would definitely be a Western park. I think Grand Canyon has a special place.
Yeah, that's it's hard to beat. It's overwhelming in a good way, but
Yeah, yeah, no, it's a pretty amazing place.
not Death Valley, huh? That's not your favorite part.
I've spent a fair amount of time at Death Valley and I like it, but it's yeah, there are no favorite children, right?
Right. Well, the Bering Land Bridge is pretty hard to beat. That's pretty incredible. And were you was it in the winter? Because it's
Oh
pretty
no,
sloshy.
no.
Oh, okay. It was in the
No.
summer.
Yeah, so because we were doing field work and it was the vegetation studies and fire history and got to learn a lot about lichens.
Well, oh, that's really cool. Oh, excellent. Right. Well, we are just about turning 4 o'clock, and it looks like we have quite a lot of viewers who have joined us, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone to our Thursday webinar series. It is wonderful to be back. I was out with some of our webinar viewers and other folks last week, so I had a stand-in. So welcome. Before we get started, we'll go ahead and start, as we always do, with our land acknowledgement that Crow Canyon acknowledges the Pueblo, Ute, Paiute, Diné, and Jicarilla Apache people on whose traditional homelands our campus sits. Our work is not possible without Indigenous people in the past, present, and future, and we respectfully recognize and honor ancestral and descendant Indigenous communities for their contributions to all humankind. Crow Canyon is grateful to all Indigenous people, and we support the preservation and protection of cultural traditions, ancestral connections, and sacred lands. Thank you to all of our Indigenous partners and all of you for your support of our mission. We could not do it without everybody. Welcome again. If you're on Zoom, please pop your questions at any time during the Q&A. We'll have plenty of time for questions at the end of the presentation. And people get chatty in the chat and we might miss them if you don't put them in the Q&A section. If you're having challenges with Zoom, we are live streaming on Facebook, and you'll be able to go back and watch this again on our YouTube channel. If you have not subscribed, please do so. We've got some really awesome webinars coming up. Our friend Dr. Brett Hill talking next week about listening seriously for O'odham heritage. And then the week after that, impacts to Diné activities with the San Juan River after the Gold King mine spill with Dr. Carletta Chief. So some really fascinating and relevant contemporary topics coming up over the next couple of weeks. Huge gratitude moment. As always, this webinar series is free, yet so many of you make donations every time you sign up for a webinar. Thank you. The reason that we can have this series and offer it globally is because of your donations. So thank you. We are a nonprofit and we are almost entirely supported by the generosity of all of you who believe in our mission and participate in it with you. Or with us. And speaking of that, just a little extra special slide. Last week, I was I was out on our Glen Canyon Rising travel program. And the week before that, I had another webinar viewer who came and visited us on campus. And so this was I posted this on social media too, that we had a really fun experiences over the last couple of weeks with people who I only knew through the webinars, actually becoming real friends in real life. So these are our friends, Calvin, Mike, Steve, and Leslie, who may be on the webinar. I haven't checked the participant list, but thank you. It was really amazing to get to make real life friends. It's always a little disconcerting because I run in and go, "Hi, I'm Liz," and they say, I know, we see you." But also Taylor wanted me to point out that while all of our programs have been sold out and they're listed as sold out on the website right now, we had 2 cancellations on 2 incredible programs. Movement in Memory, which will be going through Chaco Canyon, or Salmon, Aztec, Mesa Verde, Chimney Rock, with Teresa Pascual, Octavia Ciatwa, and our own Dr. Susan Ryan. I too will be on that trip. So there is 1 seat, a cancellation that just happened on that, on Movement and Memory. And then on our Bears Ears camping trip, we had a cancellation that hasn't been filled yet too, which is a spectacular trip. We really get to know each other on those trips in the backcountry. So if you're at all interested, these 2 cancellations just opened up this week and they will go fast. So please just go ahead and email Taylor. I'm sure she'll put her email address in the chat, and she's also on our website if you want to become a friend in real life and not just on our digital platforms too. Another thank you. We have a campaign going. You've probably seen some emails about it or seen it on social media. We're raising money this spring for our Dive into Decades of Data campaign. As our speaker and I were just chatting about, Crow Canyon has one of the largest archaeological databases in the country. We have 40 years worth of data from archaeological projects here in the greater Mesa Verde region. In that database, it requires and upkeep. And so we are doing a little bit of a fundraiser this spring so that we can work on our database this year. So please consider donating to that. Susie was talking about how the pollen data that she'll be talking about today is really made meaningful by the fact that we can compare it to other sites in the region by virtue of this large database. So please consider helping us out. Without further ado, I am really excited to introduce our distinguished speaker today, who is going to be talking about something that has captured all of our imaginations recently with the discovery of cotton pollen at the Haynie site. Susie spent her early career working as a firefighter, park ranger, geologist, and botanist in the great national parks of the West. We were chit-chatting about that, including Yosemite, Grand Canyon, Death Valley. She did 5 seasons in Alaska, not for the faint of heart. She has a bachelor's degree in geology from Humboldt State University and a master's in quaternary studies from Northern Arizona University in Flagstaff, where she managed the pollen lab for 23 years, specializing in archaeopollenology. She has contributed pollen perspectives to research on prehistoric sites in New Mexico, Southwest Colorado, and Arizona, and paleoecological and fire history research from sites in California to New Mexico and Colorado. Her current interest is prehistoric agriculture in the arid Southwest and the potential for these ancient low-tech systems to help modern farmers mediate climate change and shrinking water resources. Such incredibly important and relevant work. Thank you for joining us today, Susie. We're so excited to hear what you have to share.
Yes, well, it's a pleasure to be here. Is this where we start the PowerPoint?
Yeah, go ahead and share your screen now.
Okay, let's see. That would be share. And this. And share. And let's see. You're sitting on top of my menu bar.
Feel free to drag our heads around and put them in the spot that's best for you.
Yeah, it's the menu bar. Oh, there it is. There it goes. Okay. All right. I think we're happening. Okay.
Perfect.
And I just want to get my little laser pointer up in a corner. Welcome. It is a pleasure to be here to talk about this cotton pollen we found at the Haynie site. And I do want to acknowledge Crow Canyon. I know we just went through a big list of thank yous, but it's really, this kind of research doesn't happen without an organization like Crow Canyon Archaeological Center. And for the Haynie site, especially Samantha Flad. The Haynie site contains Chacoan style great houses. And these were not an uncommon architecture within a specific region from the Four Corners down to the Little Colorado River. This map shows the distribution of the great houses. And you can see this dashed line is the San Juan River Basin, and the Haynie site is up towards the northern limit of that. But it goes all the way down to the Little Colorado River. Crow Canyon Archaeological Center began work at the Haynie site in 2016 as part of the Northern Chaco Outliers project, which is a multi-year, multi-site project. And it's focused on the Lakeview community, which is northeast of Cortez. Here's Cortez. And then this inset over here is the three sites that make up the Lakeview community. It's the sites, these sites are near the confluence of McElmo Creek and Simon Draw. And so like it is today, it was a great farming area. And the community contains 4 Chacoan style great houses. There's and a great kiva, numerous residential small sites and landscape features. Then it's all kind of packed into a couple of kilometers. 2 of the great houses are at the Haynie site, and the other 2 are at the Wallace and Ida Jean site. The Wallace Ruin is directly south and within sight of the Haynie, and like the Haynie, it contains a Pueblo room block. Bruce and Cynthia Bradley own the Wallace site, and they've been doing excavations there for several decades. And most of the ruins at the Haynie site have been acquired by the Archaeological Conservancy. There's a long history in the site's archaeology and deeper cultural deposits that represent about 400 years. And structures there were constructed over middens and on top of earlier structures. In some cases, structures were built inside other structures. So when you get this kind of intensity over several hundred years, it's actually really rewarding to work on a site like this as an archaeobotanist, because there's just this really rich archive of Pueblo plant use. In 2023, I analyzed 50 pollen samples that had been collected by Crow Canyon between 2017 and 2022. The samples are all from the western portion of the site. So this shows the site. This is the eastern great house with its kivas. This is the western great house. And then you can see area A and area C. These are the ruins of some room blocks and other structures. The room blocks date to the Pueblo 1 period, the area A1, from AD 760 to AD 890, and the Pueblo 2 period in the area C, AD 890 to 1030. Most of the pollen samples were from floor surfaces, and 11 samples were collected from interior features. Key resources visible in the pollen data include an abundance of maize, significant representation of 2 cacti, prickly pear and cholla, and the presence of squash and cotton. This talk is all about the cotton, which was identified in just 2 samples. And so palynology, it's not a common tool in the Southwest still. And in the early years of archaeological excavations, it was hardly ever employed. In part, this was due to archaeopalynology being relatively young science with few experienced researchers. It wasn't really until the 1960s that pollen studies started contributing useful information. Another aspect of the slow adoption of pollen analyses is the requirement and expense of a technical chemical laboratory to extract the pollen grains. So it looks something like this. The whole process starts with collecting sediment from appropriate archaeological contexts. And that would be, examples of that would be like floor samples from habitations that have been sealed underneath roof fall or wall fall, which then protects those surfaces from post-occupation contamination. Most of the Haynie samples that were analyzed were floor samples that were sealed beneath some other kinds of deposits, and that was that's to the credit of the Crow Canyon archaeologists. They did a great job with the collection. The next step is the samples are treated chemically to separate and concentrate the microscopic sized pollen entrained within the sediment. And then the extracted residues are subsampled and examined under high power compound microscope to identify the assemblages. And just a quick nod to Von Bryant Jr. He ran the Texas A&M Pollen Lab for decades. He was passionate about palynology, a meticulous scientist, and he trained and inspired the next several generations of pollen researchers. He's passed now, and we miss him. Fossil pollen recovered from archaeological sites is typically really degraded, so it's hard to identify under the microscope. But cotton grains are unique, and this next slide shows pictures of the Haynie cotton pollen compared to a reference specimen from modern cotton. In the size of pollen grains varies widely by different plant species, from tiny grains that might be just 0.02 of a millimeter in diameter to just over 1/10 of a millimeter. And cotton is one of the larger pollen types. The 3 grains shown in these 3 microphotographs all have diameters in excess of 1/10 of a millimeter. I'm going to get this idea right out in front as while we're looking at pictures of pollen, and that is that when we're talking about pollen recovered from archaeological contexts, there is an implied close link to plant flowers and not the other plant parts like seeds and fruit and wood that are so the hallmark of the flotation and macrobotanical analyses. Pollen works really differently than macrobotanical materials. Pollination ecology is another key concept. Cotton is an insect pollinated plant, and it produces a small amount of poorly dispersed pollen. In contrast, corn is a wind pollinated plant. It produces abundance of pollen and it blows all over the place. So this difference is another foundation interpretive concept. And it's why these 2 grains of cotton pollen from the Haynie carry a heavyweight interpretive punch, whereas 1 grain of corn pollen from the same context could be dismissed as meaningless. I'm next going to talk about the 2 rooms where the cotton pollen was found. The first is room 1073-193. Room 1073 was built during the earliest construction phase of the Pueblo 1 room block in Area A. Radiocarbon AMS results from surface 2 in room 1073 document a range of date intercepts between 708 to 952 AD. This room, and so this is 1073. It lacked a formal hearth, and that floor plan is consistent with a back or storage room. There was a lot of remodeling right on top of this room. 193 was built on top of 1073, and then if you look at this sketch, after 193, there was another room, 186, that was built over a portion of the room. 5 pollen samples were analyzed from 1073, 2 from the prepared floor surface, 2 from beneath artifacts on the floor, and 1 from a deeper use surface. The cotton pollen was identified from a single sample taken beneath this moccasin gray jar. So again, that's a very good context for that's not been contaminated by post-occupation pollen. The second sample came from the room block in Area C. That's this area. And here, this shows the wall ruins of that room. Again, it's a room that had another room built on top of it later. Only two samples were analyzed from the floor of room 1042, and only one of these contained economics maize, and it contained maize, cotton, and squash. And this was actually a really special sample. You don't get to see a sample like this very often. The pollen assemblage was nearly entirely pure maize. Out of a count of 231 grains, 198 grains were maize pollen. The cotton and squash in this sample was identified during lower magnification scans. So kind of touching back to this idea that pollen is linked to flowers, I'm still actually puzzling about how you get a pure maize pollen sample on the floor of a Pueblo room that has a little bit of cotton and squash in it. And one scenario is collection of pollinating corn tassels, or even the pure corn pollen, which was used for a lot of different applications, but somehow combined with cotton and squash flowers and then left on this room floor. Okay, so that sort of gets us going. So why is this pollen story from Haynie such a big deal? And it's a special find because after more than 50 years of research in the Four Corners region and the San Juan River basin, there is no evidence of archaeobotanical cotton. From archaeological excavations and studies, with just a few exceptions that I'll talk about at the end, and the Haynie site is one of those exceptions. These next couple of slides lean heavily on Karen Wright's excellent master's thesis. She completed an exhaustive literature review for archaeological evidence of macrobotanical cotton remains, visited the collections where the cotton materials had been archived, and measured bolls and seeds to create a morphometric database. She also grew cotton in experimental plots at 3 sites along an elevational gradient from the Little Colorado River near Wapaki National Park at 4,200 feet elevation to 7,000 feet in Flagstaff. The earliest securely dated cotton in Karen's study region is from the large multi-component Anasazi cliff dwelling of Antelope House in Canyon del Muerto, which is along Chinle Wash and is a tributary to the San Juan. There, 5 boll segments, 1 cotton seed, and a small amount of unworked fiber were recovered in a room that was dated to approximately AD 700. And actually at Antelope House, there's a long history from the Basketmaker 3 to the Pueblo 3 of increasing amounts of cotton materials recovered. Another multi-component Basketmaker 3 and Pueblo 3 site near Kayenta yielded 1 cotton seed, and the context was clearly reported as a basket maker between AD 600 to 800. And then I ran across this really intriguing teaser of a secondhand account of cotton in a medicine man's kit from a Basketmaker 3 site in the Four Corners region. And normally, secondhand accounts really wouldn't count as very good evidence, but both Emil Haury and Jesse Nussbaum were very respected archaeologists in their time frame. More recent research since Karen's inventory includes a master's thesis at Eldon Pueblo near Flagstaff, where cotton seeds and hulls were recovered from a context dated to approximately AD 900. By Pueblo II time, cotton was visible at a number of archaeological sites. Again, we're talking about botanical cotton remains. Here's Antelope House on Chinle Wash. And this map and the next map will show the Pueblo distribution of sites documented by Karen. Blue star on this map is the approximate location of the Haynie site and Cortez. And then the big star is the Four Corners intersection. And then this inset map is a blow up of the Glen Canyon region. So we begin to see cotton farming centers And this distribution persisted into the Pueblo 3 sites, with, again, the Glen Canyon region, and oddly enough, around Flagstaff, which because of the higher elevations. This little cluster of sites is the Kayenta-Segi Wash area. So you're seeing a slight expansion of the cotton farming sites. Karen's research was focused on where cotton was documented. But what I find just absolutely stunning is the number of large excavation projects in the Four Corners region with extensive archaeobotanical data where no cotton has been recovered. Oh, here's the map of these are the cotton growing centers, just kind of getting a big regional view of it with the Colorado River and Hopi Mesas, the Flagstaff area, and here's Canyon de Chelly. So this this next slide shows these large archaeological projects where no archaeobotanical cotton remains have been recovered. It's not a complete or comprehensive list, but these are some of the larger data recovery projects that included significant archaeobotanical research. Again, none of these projects recovered cotton. Probably several of you archaeologists out there will recognize these projects. If you add this all up, there are literally thousands, several thousands of pollen flotation and macrobotanical samples that have been analyzed and documented from these projects. And they, at the larger Chaco sites, there are examples of cotton cloth, but there are no archaeobotanical remains. The work completed at Salmon Ruin is particularly notable because of how organized and comprehensive that project was. Salmon was a Chacoan-style three-story pueblo containing 275 rooms. Its location is near Farmington along the San Juan River. There were two occupations at the site. The primary Chacoan period was AD 1100s, and the following AD 1200s occupation is attributed to the Mesa Verde Anasazi. Salmon was excavated by Cynthia Irwin Williams and crew from 1970 to 1978. Ursula Bohr directed the archaeobotanical efforts, assisted by Karen Adams, and their systematic and meticulous sampling, archiving, and analyses set the standard for how to do Southwest archaeobotany. The artifacts and vegetal material recovered from Salmon is one of the best examples of this San Juan cotton story. There were cotton textiles. Out of 1,100 fragments of worked fiber, there were 10 pieces of cotton cloth and 6 segments of cotton cordage. And there was also a glimpse of loom weaving. 4 wooden weaving tools were excavated from a single room in this area that's right next to this big tower kiva. This is the Great Kiva at Salmon. Lori Webster's synthesis of the textiles from Chaco, Aztec, and Salmon describe a regional pattern where weaving tools are correlated to ceremonial rooms associated with kivas. She suggests that by AD 1100, weaving and spinning of cotton at Chaco, Salmon, and Aztec were ritually focused activities. So against this evidence for weaving at larger Chacoan sites, there is a consensus among archaeobotanists and textile specialists that the raw cotton materials were not grown at these sites and therefore had to have been imported. Again, the gold standard is the Salmon archaeobotanical record, where 216 flotation samples representing 64 separate locations from rooms and middens were analyzed, and no cotton seeds or other botanical material were identified. An unknown number of pollen samples analyzed by Ursula Bohr also did not produce any cotton. But interestingly, in looking for information about the Salmon archaeobotanical database, I learned that the 1970s analytical focus was just on the macrobotanical samples. And as a result, there are more than 2,000 pollen samples that were never analyzed. These are archived at the Salmon Ruin Center and present opportunities for future research in that next generation of palynologists. Lack of archaeobotanical cotton cannot be due to a preservation bias or related to the technology of cotton agriculture and processing, as cotton seeds and pollen are visible at small and large sites where cotton was cultivated. These are just a few examples from sites where agriculture is interpreted, and they show that when cotton is farmed at sites, it registers with some abundance. Especially this Eastern Grand Canyon project is a good example because these are there were 6 sites analyzed with archaeobotanical samples, but they're small one-room farmsteads. They're small sites. They're all kind of clustered in the same region, but they're small. Cotton seeds and or pollen were recovered at 5 of those sites. And there were 10 total samples with cotton, pollen, and or seeds. Hammurabi is a dramatic example. It's a later site, 80, 1300s. 1200 room, Hammurabi 2, 1200 room ancestral Hopi Pueblo along the Little Colorado River. And there, in one of the big kivas, Karen Adams identified uncharred cottonseed in 57% of the flotation samples. And just one last site here, the Lizard Man Village, which is near Flagstaff. This site, Masonry Pueblo and Pit House, is at an elevation greater than 6,000 feet, but there were cotton seeds in the 2 occupation components that are spanning from the AD 1100s into the 1200s. And one P3 storage pit contained 140 charred cotton seeds. So again, when it's happening, it does show up in the archaeobotanical record. So I want to shift gears now and swerve off into cotton biology and ethnobotany with a little bit of pollination ecology. And the big question in my mind with this Haynie cotton pollen is, what does that really mean, and how did the cotton pollen end up in those contexts? Cotton is a member of the Mallow or Malvaceae family. It's represented by species all over the world, and other important economic plants in that family are okra, chocolate or cacao, and a Southeast Asian fruit called durian, which is known as the king of fruits. So big economic family. The 4 cultivated cottons include 2 New World species, the upland cotton Gossypium hirsutum, and that one was the prehistoric cultivar. The other New World cotton is the long staple Gossypium barbadense, which today is the premium Egyptian and Pima cotton. And then the other 2 cultivated cottons are Old World cottons, a tree cotton from India, and an African Arabian cotton. The global archaeological record of cotton is deep. Fragments of cotton fabric from the Indus Valley in India are dated to 5500 BC. In the Tehuan Valley in Mexico, archaeological upland cotton materials have been dated to approximately 3500 BC. And then further south in Peru, cultivation of the long staple Gossypium barbadense has been dated to 4200 BC. Closer to home in the Southwest, the earliest directly dated cotton is from a site in central Arizona in the Roosevelt Basin, where cotton seeds yielded a radiocarbon date range of AD 240 to 390. And there is also some evidence for 1000 BP cotton agriculture along the borderlands of Arizona and Mexico. Cotton plants have a really interesting pollination ecology that limits the dispersal of their pollen. Modern studies show that most of the flowers, to varying degrees, are self-pollinating. Bees are the main insect pollinator, and experimental studies have documented increased pollination in numbers of bolls set if the beehives are kept in fields, as well as increased yields from hand pollination. And just as a little aside note here, Cotton is known as an excellent honey plant, especially that southern Arizona Pima cotton, but agricultural use of pesticides has limited the production. The cotton plant, when it flowers in a spiral pattern from the base of the plant up to the top. And then each flower is open for only one day, and then it closes, dries, and falls off the plant in the field, retaining any pollen that did not fertilize the flower stigmas. The cotton fibers are modified hairs that develop around the seeds inside that receptacle, which is called the boll. When the bolls are harvested, the dried flowers remain in the field, and so it appears improbable that any cotton pollen could persist on the fruits and be transported into an archaeological context. Ethnobotanical uses for cotton. It is a really valuable plant with more uses than just fiber. The cotton seeds are high in protein and oil. They've been found in human coprolites from Glen Canyon and Antelope House Canyon del Muerto. In the Southwest ethnographic record, there are accounts of that the Hopis and the Southern Arizona Pima and Tohono O'odham Indians ate cottonseed by roasting to make a cotton popcorn and mixed cooked seeds with corn or mesquite meals to make thick cake-like flour tortillas. Farming sites, again from the Eastern Grand Canyon, produced either cotton seeds and or pollen in 10 samples from 5 sites, and a third of those were from structure forests. So it's a pretty good indicator that cotton seeds were being roasted for food. Lisa Huckle notes that the young green bolls of cotton were eaten by tribes in Mexico. They're described as having a sweet flavor. The fiber for making string and weaving cloth. There is a modern reference to the flowers being used as a dye. And but cotton was especially prehistoric, pre-Columbian cotton was an important ceremonial item, especially as a symbol for clouds and rain. The Hopi placed cotton over the faces of deceased persons as a symbol of their transformation to clouds. Raw cotton, seeds, and the fiber were used on ceremonial cigarettes, prayer sticks, masks, and other ceremonial items. And then there is a clear connection between cotton and burial rituals. At Salmon Ruin, the 10 examples of cotton cloth, of those, 5 were associated with mortuary context. Lori Webster analyzed the Salmon Ruin textile remains, and she has commented that there was probably a much greater use of cotton than what is visible because of the highly perishable nature of the fiber. Medicinal uses, there are just a few ethnographic accounts from the Southwest of using cotton for different medical applications, but there's quite a modern literature describing the strong chemistry of cotton plants, especially for antiviral and antioxidant compounds. The upland cotton, Gossypium hirsutum, has been used in South America, China, India, and Africa to treat respiratory conditions, skin diseases, malaria, flu, hepatitis, and other conditions. And all parts of the plant were used, the bark, the stem, the leaves, and the roots and the flowers. And one recent article I found was an investigation of the use of just the flowers as an effective treatment for COVID SARS. Given the great time depth of cotton agriculture and use in South America and the Southwest, it is hard to imagine that the knowledge of medicinal uses did not spread north with trade. Returning to the pre-Columbian Southwest, the evidence for ceremonial and ritual use of cotton is especially compelling. Here are examples of caches of cotton from 3 separate corners of the Southwest and from different time periods, ranging from the AD 500s in Southeast Arizona to the 1500s at White Rock Canyon near Los Alamos in New Mexico. And these finds underscore the importance of cotton to the pre-Columbian Americans and how widespread the knowledge and use of cotton was. So in New Mexico, these uh, there's actually several caches from White Rock Canyon. White Rock Canyon, the geology there, it's a stack of tephras, and it gets these solution cavities that forms these cavettes, little caves. So this top picture is of that's raw cotton inside a vessel that was recovered, found in a cave, cavette, and then nearby, an additional 15 vessels in a basket were also discovered, in addition to this remarkably well-preserved cotton garment, which was folded neatly into this bowl and again cached in one of these caves. And I love this, a note that accompanied this image of the garment from the Los Alamos Historical Society described that the garment had been cleaned in a washing machine after it was found, before it was added to the collections. All of the New Mexico, these two examples are later, AD 1300s to 1500s. But then here's the Pinaleno cotton cache. This is from a cave in southeastern Arizona near Safford. And there was some meticulous research done on this cache. They took the cotton and actually dated several different specimens of the cotton fiber and the raw cotton. And also there was a basket recovered from this cache, and there were some dates on that. And all those dates described this story of multiple visits to keep adding new cotton to the cache, and it spanned a long time frame from the AD 500s and continuing through into the AD 1400s. In addition to the cotton, there was also a partial maize cob, an agave cordage fragment, and one seed of a cultivated amaranth, which is extremely rare. And just as another quick aside note, Karen Adams identified a seed from Salmon Ruin, a tentative identification of a cultivated amaranth. The Pinaleno cache also contained a squash seed, beans, and a variety of wild and native plants. And this last cotton cache, this is from near Flagstaff, along the Little Colorado River and near Grand Falls. And this is a Little Colorado whiteware vessel capped by an Alameda brownware bowl. It contained 10 cotton seeds, corn kernels, 1 bean, 1 juniper seed, and the age of the cache is estimated at AD 1200 to 1250. So it is certainly possible for people to have grown cotton in the San Juan Basin, especially along the rivers and streams with water. As Southwest Colorado gardeners are well aware, siding gardens in microsites protected from weather can make all the difference. And there are the season extenders. Pre-Columbian farmers would have understood all of that. And in addition, they had several techniques to mediate their challenging climates. They understood how to manage surface water, how to enhance local terrains with rock and mulch, to insulate plants and increase soil warmth. Cotton seedlings can be jump-started by pre-soaking the seeds, and then when they're planted, covering them with fine sand to provide less resistance for the emerging plants. Indigenous farmers would have known how to hand pollinate to increase yields, as well as to breed for desired traits. Immature bolls can be picked early and will continue to mature off the plant. So all of these techniques and more might have been part of the technology used on the Colorado Plateau. As discussed previously, Flagstaff was a cotton growing center, and seeds had been found at sites located at elevations between 6,000 and 7,000 feet. The prehistoric cotton grown throughout the Southwest was Gossypium hirsutum, variety hirsutum, which is the Hopi variety. And this cotton will flower within 70 days and produce bolls within 90 to 100 days. But it has relatively smaller bolls than the desert cottons. The number of plants and the amount of land required to grow enough cotton for weaving a blanket, such as the burial wraps found at Salmon, is dependent on the agricultural potential of the site. Lisa Huckel discusses a model that predicts a 1-acre irrigated cotton field in the prime cotton belt of southern Arizona could produce enough cotton for approximately 47 blankets. In contrast, a 1-acre field on the Hopi Mesas might produce enough cotton for 3 blankets. So within that range, we can see that growing enough cotton for a fiber industry would be challenging, especially in the drier, higher elevation locations. And just the sheer amount of cotton agriculture required to support a weaving industry may be one clue as to why it was not widely practiced in the San Juan Basin. So I'm running to my conclusions slide now. Karen Adams has described archaeobotany as looking through a foggy glass, and that one must squint through one eye to catch a glimpse of past human behavior. So like the parable of the 7 blind men who are describing an elephant, we can really only catch hints of the cotton story in the Four Corners region. When I first introduced this talk, I mentioned that in addition to the Haynie site, there are a few exceptions to the absence of cotton black hole. And there's actually only 3 examples of cotton pollen, and it's the 3 examples are cotton pollen. The first is at the Bluff Great House along the San Juan River, not too far from Cortez and the Haynie site. Cotton pollen was identified in 2 samples, one from the antechamber of the Great Kiva and the second sample from the smaller Northeast Kiva. The second exception is northeast of Gallup at the Vidal Great Kiva site. Here, a floor sample from the center of the Great Kiva yielded cotton pollen. And then much later in time, 1300s, pollen was identified from a Hammurabi 2 Kiva floor sample. So because of the pollination ecology of the pollen cotton plant, the recovery of cotton pollen at Haynie, and these few examples indicates the use of cotton flowers. Out of all the thousands of archaeobotanical samples analyzed throughout the San Juan Basin and the Four Corners region, it cannot be a fluke that the pollen from these exception examples are all from ceremonial structures, except for Haynie. At Haynie, the 2 intensively utilized Pueblo rooms where cotton was recovered suggest that these were locations where cotton flowers were stored or used. And I find it the example of the moccasin grayware jar, you can't help but think did that hold cotton flowers? Is that how cotton pollen got underneath that jar because the jar was broken? There's not enough evidence at Haynie to confirm any significant agriculture, but there may have been small specialty gardens for ceremonial products. Integrating the archaeobotanical data with Lori Webster's and Kate Peck Kent's comprehensive summaries of Southwest textiles, it's clear that cotton fabrics were imported, as well as raw fibers for weaving, probably originally from southern Arizona, and then in later times, P2 to P3 times, perhaps from the Colorado River San Juan confluence area and other cotton centers in the Four Corners region. So it's not a stretch to imagine that dried cotton flowers were also imported for some specialized use or recipe. And that's the end. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Susie. Really fascinating and fantastic presentation. Lots of different lines of evidence and inquiry. I think we'll go. We've got a bunch of questions coming in. So if that's okay with you, I'm going to put some of those out there. An interesting one that came in during your talk around the possibility of tracing movement of different strains of cotton throughout the Southwest. Is that, or is DNA possible from pollen grains, or how might that work?
Well, not from pollen, but from the textiles. And several people have actually suggested that. and it would be really interesting to see where like Chaco is where some of those textiles originated, and yeah.
That's fantastic. But that's not something that anyone has done yet, huh?
Not that I'm aware of.
Well, all right. We have a question from one of our local area archaeologists that says, I like your mention of flowers of cotton or corn tassels and squash on the floor. Is there any indication that these could have been ceremonially placed at the abandonment of the room and the roof collapsed to seal it? This is a common practice across the broader region, but would be the first I've ever heard of flowers being used. Usually it is whole vessels and even animals. Just would like your perspective.
Boy, there's so many aspects to the cotton story that are mystifying, and at Haynie, I thought about it a lot. How do you get, especially that one sample that's absolutely pure maize pollen, along with squash and cotton flowers, and just a little bit more on that idea. Squash is another plant that's really stingy with its pollen, so it's unusual to see squash pollen. You're always going to see less of it than was actually there as compared to corn, which is this wind pollinated abundant pollen producer. So the room, the 1073 room, was described as a back room, storage room, and the context of the sediments that were sampled had a pretty clear link to that room and not the subsequent rooms that were built on top. But that said, that little center, the 1073, 193, 186 rooms, right on that spot, that's an intensively utilized little spot in that Pueblo. So one thing, I mentioned pollinating corn tassels, but people did collect corn pollen. That's pretty well known for lots of different ceremonial and even culinary uses. And so, yeah, it could be a ceremonial deposit. It could be harvest storage somehow, but it's such an odd concentration. It does lean more towards a deliberate ritual type perspective.
Sure. Oh, thank you for that explanation and exploration. We have that we do all the time. Yeah. We have a question about, could you talk a little bit more about why cotton is so rare in the San Juan Basin? Are pollinators not abundant? Are the trade networks inadequate? Too distant? These are some of the ideas that the viewer asked.
Well, so from the archaeobotanical perspective, you have two threads to follow. One is the cotton seeds, the actual macrobotanical materials, even unworked fiber I might put in an archaeobotanical category, and then pollen. There's been a lot less pollen work done as compared to the macrobotanical. And so this absence of cotton archaeobotanical materials seems to be, or on the surface, is evidence that nobody was cultivating cotton. So there wasn't cotton there to leave an archaeobotanical record.
Right.
Short story.
No, that's good. Thank you. Someone, that tunic that was found in White Rock obviously kept,
Yeah, it's pretty stunning.
Quick indrawn breaths, and then another groan about the story about it going through a washing machine. But astonishing artifact. Somebody asked in the chat if you knew what color it was.
So it's white. And
it is white.
It's raw cotton. One of the kind of interesting things about cotton fiber that I learned is it does not take dye well. and especially like the natural dyes. So one of the there is this sort of obscure reference to use of cotton flowers as a dye, and I have wondered if that is one of the uses that's being represented by these flowers.
Right.
So yeah, so that garment is a raw cotton.
Oh, well, it's really never seen anything like it. Really spectacular. Oops.
I'm not sure where that garment is now. When I was first researching that, which was several years ago for a different project, the statement was that it's in a private collection.
Right, right. There's some interest in the chat around other areas of the Southwest, since you have a pretty comprehensive knowledge. Cotton, maybe from the Hohokam region, or even Casas Grandes. I didn't know if you could speak on that a little bit.
Well, so it is. I mean, the Salt River, the Gila River, the Hohokam culture, they were probably maybe as early as the 8500s, all up into the 1200s. They were the cotton culture. They grew amazing fields of cotton. They were consummate weavers, and that is one of the ideas especially in the early periods for the Four Corners region, that the cotton textiles that are found at Chaco and some of the larger Chacoan style sites are imported from the cotton growing capital, I guess, of the Southwest, which was at that time the Salt and Gila rivers. In the later time periods, the AD 1300s and on into the 1500s, it shifted to the Rio Grande and in New Mexico. And I've actually done a lot of work in the northern Rio Grande on this specialized gravel mulch technology. They're using Pleistocene gravels on the terraces above the Rio Grande River to create a specialized cotton growing technology. And it's a pretty good story.
Oh, that's fantastic. I think we've got a couple of comments that have popped up from the raw cotton, the white tunic. Is there some? It seems like, is there some evidence that you know of colored cotton plants that might, if cultivated or used, might produce a different than the white?
So Lori Webster's written a lot about the cotton textile record especially from the Four Corners and San Juan Basin region, and there are examples of woven designs and colors. I'm just not familiar with that database, but I believe I ran across. I didn't track it down and grab it by the throat so I could really absorb it, but there is mention of pink cotton flowers, and I'm not sure if that translates to the fiber.
Wow, really, really interesting. So I have to ask, as someone who works at a center here with lots of archaeologists, you had such a long career. You're such a specialist and wealth of knowledge. Are you training anyone to do this? What's going to happen with the future of cotton research in the Southwest?
It's a topic of conversation that comes up amongst the decreasing population pool of Southwest palynologists. We're all getting up there in age and retiring, and there really isn't a next generation kind of developing. And that said, I do have a colleague who, bless his heart, Bruce Phillips, has taken this on as a project, and he is at NAU and trying to form Northern Arizona University at Flagstaff, if anybody missed that. He's trying to form sort of a bridge between the anthropology department, contract archaeology, and training, trying to get new archaeobotanists, not just pollen people. This is also an issue for people who do macrobotanical research. Trying to get a new generation interested in getting into the field. And the Salmon Ruin unanalyzed pollen samples are like that. That really has caught my attention. It's a great project for a new person who might want to get into the world.
Yeah, that was my next question, is in addition to some of the possible research around the movement of cotton, now that we have some of the cotton from Haynie and we have a ethnobotanical expert in our lab too, maybe some of our interns and college students might jump onto this bandwagon. So.
Right. And I didn't tack it on, but I mean, it really does, the whole cotton black hole, archaeobotanical black hole in the San Juan Basin, it raises a whole list of questions that archaeologists can dive into about, trade routes and relationships between different areas, and who was growing cotton and who wasn't and why. I think there's a whole another 50 years worth of research here for people.
Absolutely. Oh, well, we're just about up on 5 o'clock. So thank you so much, Susie. This was
you.
a really fantastic presentation. Lots of compliments coming in the chat. And hopefully we are inspiring a new generation of cotton researchers with your work and this discovery. So, and I hope you will come up and visit us one of these days.
I will.
Perfect.